morning.
Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, February 12th at the Ayer Town Hall. My name is Kurt Preskowski. I am the chairman of the Finance Committee. Let me read the announcement. This meeting of the Finance Committee will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise provided by law. Members of the public with particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceeding by joining Zoom meeting ID 978-772-8220 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@ayer.mass.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. Okay, just a quick Zoom note. Folks may see my picture as a Zoom participant. I am just zooming in from my personal computer as just to see how it looks on the public zooming in. So I'm sort of a guinea pig, if you will, or in any case, we were just curious. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. I wanted to note that this is the meeting originally scheduled for February 6th that was canceled to inclement weather. So, first thing, are there any changes to the agenda or notes?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the January 16th meeting minutes. There's a copy in your packet. Oh, okay.
I motion we accept the January 16th meeting minutes as presented.
I second the motion.
I was just going to say, did anyone have any comments or adjustments?
I just read through them. I didn't see any.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did too, because I printed these off at home and I had seen nothing. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Okay. That is done. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Capital Planning Committee update. I will present that. In your packet, you'll notice is the big thing discussed at the last Capital Planning Committee meeting was the senior center. And there was a presentation done by the senior center. And the big item was a draft proposal that was put together by Robert Ponchbury, Brianna, the town manager. You have a copy of that memo. And if you look on the attachment, on the second page, it's two-sided. What was discussed and will be further discussed by the capital planning is a proposal to use, and again, I'm looking at the second page of the memo, some funds from various, the capital stabilization funds, some grants, UDAG, legislative earmarks. Again, these are proposal ideas to reduce the overall amount of the senior center proposal, which is $16,600,000 to be reduced various means listed there. down to around $12,100,000. And that what we would, as a town, again, this is a proposal to be discussed by the Capital Planning Committee meeting more, and would be not being discussed at this town meeting in April, but possibly at a fall town meeting, would be the debt exclusion that we would be looking at would only be 10 million. So the 16,600,000 is reduced by various grants, and taking that down to 12,100,000, and another 2,100,000 would have to be realized through savings or other cost cuttings or other grants, so that the idea would be only having the town fund some $10 million. So that's, again, very short summary. And again, I have to emphasize that this is a proposal for discussion, ideas of how to get the overall cost down to the taxpayer to be lower. So, for your information. That's where we are with this. Essentially is the last item of the Capital Planning Committee for 2026. Any notes on that? Comments at this point? Again, I think this is more just FYI, FYC, FYI.
If we're on this topic, then the first page of Robert's memo, that if the town borrows 10 million, then the impact to each homeowner, I guess each residential property, that if your assessed value is 650,000, then you will pay additional tax about $214.50, and this will be for 30 years. How many years would this amount impact individual homeowners?
Robert, we're going to bring you on board real quick here.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, to Jin's question, that is a scenario that would assume a 30-year borrow.
Yeah, that's what
Yep.
I thought.
Okay.
Versus,
Sorry, follow-up question. I know it had been brought up before that it would be front-loaded or descending payments. Is that what this assumes, or is this equal payments?
Barbara, why don't you, Mr. Chair, sorry, Barbara.
So that was based on a 30-year borrow, and it was doing level principal or declining debt. So that would be the first year impact, which would be the largest impact, and then it would decrease every year from there.
So in like 10 years, instead of $148, it would be $120 or whatever.
Potentially, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So the impact is the most at the first year. We do it that way because it saves the town millions of dollars by doing that way versus having level debt service. And then also the impact does decrease for the residents.
Okay. Good. Okay. So again, this is just an update from the Capital Planning Committee. And again, a lot more to be discussed on this particular topic, but where we are so far with those. Then there is the rate review committee update. Robert?
So, the rate review committee met last night, February 11th, and ultimately the recommendations were regarding the water rate was to increase the water rate at 2% and use $500,000 of reserve funds to cover the expected water department expenditures fiscal 2022. And it was recommended the sewer rate be increased at 2.5% over fiscal year 2025. So these recommendations are subject to the approval of the select board, and our next meeting is March 11th.
So those are the proposed rate, water and sewer rates. Again, still needing to be approved by the select board. And actually, there's going to be a public hearing also, I think March 18th.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so that's the updates on the capital planning and rate review. The other thing is, I've got on our agenda is the buy board. And we discussed this at the joint meeting of the select board and finance committee last week. And for this year only, we decided with the select board not to be using the buy board because that between our active participation between, as we just saw with the capital planning and rate review and select board joint meetings, I think we're hitting all the items that need to be covered. So, okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a our first department presentation. And I just say it like that because we will be having fire, police, DPW in the coming weeks. So this will be our first one from the administration group, which is
All right.
here with Robert.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the FinCom, good evening, and I'm joined with the Finance Manager, Robert Tierney, and the Town Accountant, Kerry Cooper, who are both integral to our budget and financial process, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and we sort of have three topics. The first is we'll go through draft one of the budget, and I've prepared just a few slides which I'll use and are posted on the site as an overview of the draft one budget, focusing on the budget drivers, and of course would be happy to answer any questions or points from the FinCom as we go through the budget. And then after that, I'd like to, Barbara and I'd like to have an initial discussion, and you have another memo which we'll use, initial discussion on the proposed uses for free cash for consideration by town meeting to start that process.
May I help you?
Yeah, where did the,
You were in the right spot.
was it this? This was this, all right.
Yep.
Right there, so then his presentation.
Yep.
That presentation.
Yep. And so I passed out, again, hard copies of draft one of the budget from February 17th, which you already have, but just so you have a hard copy. For folks watching at home, draft one of the January 17th budget was posted on the FinCom page by the chair and is also on the budget page. So I have a couple of presentation slides, and then we can put the budget up on the screen and go through there. So next slide, please. All right. So just a brief summary of draft one of the FY26 budget, which was transmitted on January 17th. It does not include the school assessments, the Ayer Shirley Regional School District or the Neshoba Valley Tech High School assessments. However, as the FinCom is aware, we now have those. So draft two of this document, which will come out on February 18th, we will incorporate those assessments into the budget. As we saw, the Ayer Shirley Regional School District proposed assessment increase is 6.7% to Ayer, and the Neshoba Valley Technical High School actually is just about a 12% decrease due to fewer students, but we can get into that after. Draft one also does not include the union, non-union contracts that are under negotiation in process. Many of those are wrapping up, and my goal is to have all of them, or at least close to all of them, reflected in draft two of the budget, those costs. And lastly, it does not include the annual non-union cost of living adjustment, which for the financial policies, I'll be making that recommendation to the select board on February 18th. And as always, the FinCom, you'll get that memo in that recommendation. on that. So it remains a work in progress as we move forward. So draft one in front of you, the total is just over 20 million. It's just over a $1.1 million increase from last year, or a percentage increase, as you see, about 5.9%. Now, just briefly on that, in an ideal world, sort of the theoretical model is it would be great if budgets never increased, or more importantly, if they didn't increase beyond 2.5%, reflecting, the Proposition 2.5 principle. However, that's very difficult generally to find. Our target is like to get the budget increase under $1 million and get that percentage increase more in the 5 to 4.5% range. I just want to stress, thanks to this committee, all of the departments and the select board, we are in a very strong financial position coming into this budget, and as our goal is every year, and thank you for all of your help and support, is to maintain that position. Also just want to point out all of the budget documents will be continued to be populated on the budget page on the web page, so you can access it there, and if you need hard copies, through my office during normal business hours. So next slide, please. I just got just a couple overview. So what are the budget drivers? What's driving the increase in draft one? So as you look through draft one, I know the committee is familiar with that, many budget line items are either fixed lines or fixed costs. There are small increases, generally some decreases, but what are the major drivers driving this budget up? And some of these are perennial, they're every year it seems, others are unique to each year. So for this year, as I just said, the increase is just over 1.1 million. You can see that almost all of those increases are confined to about 7 areas. The first is health insurance. We budgeted for 15% is the estimate for our placeholder. That represents a $339,000 increase. Generally speaking, we've been fortunate. It usually comes in at 10%. Unfortunately, this year it's coming in at 14.8%. The good news is it's below what we budgeted. The problem is it didn't give us as much room as we had hoped or the insurer had hoped. We learned what's driving health insurance this year are a couple of factors. One is it's sort of a national trend in healthcare. The shortage of primary doctors is causing increased costs on the insurance side. We're also learning that weight loss medications, which are extremely popular but very expensive on the insurance side, there was a 350% increase in their usage just in the last year. And there was a Medicare, Medicaid federal relief legislation last July, which was a positive federal thing for Medicare and Medicare, but to make up those costs that fell to the insurance company. So we remain optimistic that after this year, this should more be in about a 10% or below line. If we had stayed in the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group, which dissolved, would never have been able to withstand these increases, and it would have been probably a 20% increase easily. And Barbara and I learned there was one group, private municipal insurance group, that had a 32% increase. So it's a volatile time. So that's one driver. The good news is we did plan and budget for it and don't have to add to it. The second one is the Middlesex Retirement and Pension Assessment. So every municipality in the Commonwealth pays a pension assessment, in this case to Middlesex Retirement, for our employees. It's our portion of that pension assessment. I'm going to sort of simplify it without getting way into the weeds, but every 2 years, the retirement system does a census analysis to determine your assessment every 2 years. And the two principal drivers of the assessment are the number of positions that you have and the compensation for them. This last 2-year cycle, we had 5 new positions hit, and there's been increase in compensation, the assessment has gone up. I also want to point out that we forward fund the pension using $300,000 in free cash. If this represented about an 11% increase, we've calculated that if we hadn't forward funded the pension assessment, which is a proactive measure by town meeting, the increase would have been closer to about 17%. So it would have been higher. This was higher than we had hoped, but the 5 new, actually we had 6 positions that hit it since the last 2 years. The 4 firefighters, the water and sewer superintendent position, and the town social worker. So I do not anticipate new positions of that magnitude for the next cycle. The fire department, and I know that you'll be having the fire department come before you, there are 2 areas in the fire department, one that we knew about and one unfortunately we didn't know about. The first one we knew about is that this is the last year of the SAFER grant that funded the 4 firefighter positions. So the grant is gone. This is the final year of the integration. So there's a $240,000 increase to the fire department budget that we will not have moving forward. This is the last piece. We knew that this was going to come from the inception of the SAFER grant. Barbara and the fire chief and the town also designed the last several budget cycles to sort of integrate this a little bit over time. So the $240,000 is unique to this year and then will not be the case. The other one, I got to skip over just one, increase to fire department overtime due to the hospital closure, $50,000. The hospital closing on August 31st has had huge impacts to the town that we are just starting to realize, and not just the town, the region. And I know this meeting, it's not on the agenda, maybe another time get all into the hospital stuff. But one of the immediate impacts has been to the emergency service system, specifically overtime, because now the firefighters have to travel further, whether to Leominster or Emerson, distances and time, more costs and so forth. So proactively, we've added $50,000 to the fire department overtime line, which we'll get into in a moment, taking into account those impacts. That is the chief and the deputy chief's best analysis on this. This is a moving issue. We're confident that between the reserve fund and this $50,000, we should be covered. But there was no intent to have this $50,000, obviously, until the hospital closed. I just put the retirement of debt up there, the $67,830, as another driver as we continue to retire the debt. And if there are questions on that, Barbara's the expert. She can speak more on that. And then the last 2, the Ayer Parks Department, the $45,541, they implemented a assistant parks director position sort of mid-year using their parks funding for that. That position is now going to hit the budget moving forward, so that is largely what that represents. And then the Ayer Library budget request, again, just showing about a $42,000 increase between services, programs, and personnel. So you add that all together, you almost get to the 1.1 million in increases. There's, of course, a sundry increases throughout it. And then the next slide, maybe, and we can come back to anything that the committee wants or questions. So let's also talk briefly about efficiencies, because I do believe all of our departments, boards, committees, the town meeting, people have been supportive of a very efficient municipal government. So we should highlight some of the efficiencies of savings. So one of them, and this is more of a movement, but the stormwater, with the creation of the Stormwater Enterprise Fund that'll go into effect on July 1st, it used to be in the operating budget. That $86,000 will now move to the enterprise fund, and that will be funded by the stormwater rate by rate payers. So that, I flagged that because when I'm sure we get to town meeting too, the two new pieces, there'll be a specific stormwater enterprise article, and this piece will be out of the budget. The other, a big savings that we knew was coming was in the IT department. Last year, if you recall, we were in transition in the IT department, and therefore we had ramped up the IT budget. I'm not sure, what direction that would go in. I'm pleased to report that we have hired a very good IT coordinator in Max Goodwin, who's hit the ground running. The consultant contract, we've been able to reduce that by $82,322. So we had ramped that up, and as I told the town last year, the goal was that to be a one-time thing, and I'm pleased to report that was the case. The dispatchers, that savings of almost $11,000, the $10,499, if the committee will recall, a new intermunicipal agreement was negotiated with Shirley and State 911, largely through Chief Gill's efforts, and it was a favorable, not that the previous contract wasn't favorable, but this one is even shifting with costs in between the grant. There's a savings there. Snow removal, I think we might have jinxed ourselves, but the DPW director, based on the last couple winters, was able to take a little bit out, and then it started snowing, but just a small one. The tree warden budget, that small amount, the $4,900, was reduced because the tree warden and DPW have made great progress on all what we call the high priority, high-risk trees. So now they're on to the lower, so there was some savings there. And then the town clerk and the elections budget, a small decrease because there are fewer elections next year. So there was some savings, about $196,000 reflected in draft one. And next slide, please. So next steps. So the draft 2 of the budget will come to the FinCom, the Select Board, and the public on February 18th. As I mentioned, on February 18th, we'll know the COLA recommendation. March 4th is the absolute target date to complete all of the contract negotiations. We're ahead of schedule, and I'm trying to get all of that, hopefully, to be reflected in draft 2. March 12th, mark your calendars as the public budget forum at 6 in this room. That'll be a joint meeting of the Select Board and FinCom with all department heads here. We'll be in draft 3, which is really our goal to be sort of the final draft, subject to any revisions by the FinCom or the Select Board. Want to answer any questions, and also for the public. March 28th is the deadline for all warrant articles and citizens petitions. April 1st, the Select Board will finalize and approve the warrant, which will include the budget in it. April 4th, the warrant will be posted, sent to printing and mailing, and before you know it, it'll be Monday, April 28th. Annual town meeting starts at 7 in the auditorium. So though the middle of February, it's moving quickly. And then, as I just put the note, this is an ongoing process. As things continue to review and revise, we will notify the Select Board, FinCom, any impacted board or department, and we'll post all documents and information on the FY26 budget page. So that's sort of a snapshot of sort of the high overview of draft 1 of the budget, and maybe we could pull up draft 1 itself, and then through you, Mr. Chair, as it's the FinCom's meeting, we can answer any questions that the committee may have on draft 1, or if you want to briefly, we can go down through the budget. A lot of it is sort of level funded and so forth. So yeah, if you go to town manager, yep, and then FY, yep, and it's right, yep. Eric, you're a pro. Yeah, and I know it's small, but that's why I brought copies for everybody here. And this is draft 1. So when you get draft 2, on February 18th, any changes will be clearly highlighted, but I sort of touched upon the last pieces that are to be put in there.
If I may, want to throw one question out,
Sure.
Robert. So one thing I was sort of hoping to look at on part of the agenda is, in other words, as far as you, as your administration group,
Mhm.
are there any big things on
Mhm.
just part of that budget?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
You'll touch on those
Yep,
as we
yep.
go through the big budget?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
we were including both of those, the idea of looking at
Yep.
town hall administration as its own department.
Yep.
That we're looking at that budget, and then, as we would look at
Mhm.
fire or DPW, then the bigger picture is the
Yep.
actual, the omnibus budget. Okay, good,
Yep.
thank you.
So we'll do that briefly, and please, through the chair, any questions, comments, anything we want to circle back to. So on draft one of the budget, as the first department is the moderator, as just the stipend for the moderator. That position is subject to the non-union COLA recommendation. Next is the select board budget, and where the chair was talking about the administration, which we're here to talk about tonight. So in this budget, there are, if you look at the select board salary line, and you'll see it's proposed $321,572. That budget line contains the following. It contains the town manager's salary, the assistant town manager's salary, and the 3 select board stipends. There is there's a $2,650 increase, which is a contractual step for the assistant town manager. And I should note that both my contract and her contract, as the note says, are currently under negotiation. So when that's finalized, those costs will be put in there. The next line, that's the $58,129, that is for the departmental assistant, and many of you may have met Pedro, relatively newer position. That is that position. And you'll see there's about a 12%, almost 13% decrease of $8,544. That was because when the position was budgeted and the individual, there was a previous individual there that was paid at a higher step based on experience and so forth. So this employee came in at a lower step, so there's that savings there. And then the rest of the budget, you'll see, the services and supply line items, pretty level funded, a small amount in the select board expense line, similar. So minus the 2 personal service contracts, there's about a negative 1%, which obviously with the 2 contracts that will flip to the positive side, but not by too much. The next budget underneath, in talking of administration, is benefits and payroll. This is Miss Amanda Lewis, the benefits and payroll manager that many of you probably have met or worked with. So the first line item, $77,625, is her compensation. You'll see there's an increase. That's a step, again, per the non-union grid, that's contractual increase. We have in here, under the services and supplies, there have been some increases. One of them is a movement, so you'll see this under the services line. There's an increase of, it looks like $5,700. However, this is for the Harpers and labor, sort of the logic fees. Most of that was transferred from accounting department, so it's sort of within the budget transfer. So it's not necessarily, it reflects an increase for this department, but overall in the budget is not a significant increase. Again, the increases you see in the benefits and payroll are under like supplies, expenses. Amanda has really been trying to do a lot of professional development for staff, wellness and awareness programs, a lot of positive efforts in that sense. The next line is the reserve fund, which, as the FinCom knows, rests with the FinCom, and to activate the reserve fund requires a positive vote of both the Select Board and the Finance Committee. And the criteria to access the fund is any unforeseen or unexpected or extraordinary impact that we didn't anticipate in the budget process. Barbara and I are recommending that we level fund it at $150,000, and the reason is if you move over to the left, you'll see the actuals that we've been trending. FY21 was about 44,000, 81,000 in FY22, 81,000 FY23, FY24, 72,000. We have not accessed the reserve fund yet, which is a good thing, but it's also not, it's very common that we haven't at this point. It's when we get to the end of the fiscal year, usually the town accountant, any accounts. So we're pretty confident that the 150,000 is ample for the unforeseen for the town. And we factored the 50,000 for the fire overtime because, in all honesty, that isn't really unforeseen. We know there's an impact there. So we're recommending keeping it at 150,000. The town accountant, also part of the administration. The first item is the salary line item. There's the accountant's salary, again, contractual increase. The second line is the assistant town accountant, which is a full-time position that supports the town accountant. That's the $69,272. And there's the increase there is also contractual in that position is under the town hall clerical union. The town accountant, as advised Barbara and I, there is an increase in the annual audit price, and we're also, the town accountant's anticipating we'll need a single audit for the year upcoming. And most of the municipal auditing prices have been going up. It's the cost of business, so there's an increase there. And then that 4,000 deduction under services is what I just mentioned, that this function, though under this budget, really should be under the benefits payroll. So we just did an internal move there. The next line, the financial computer support. This is really, the town uses Munis, as you've often heard Barbara or Carrie talk about. The Munis support is largely under this financial computer support budget. Specifically, there is an increase of $5,680, 14% increase for Munis financial software upgrades and support. And then other than that, so pretty much it's a level funded budget. The Board of Assessors, also part of the administration. The assessor's salary line item, the $89,399, that includes the full-time assessor, that's April Ina Coney, and the 3 stipends of the Board of Assessors in that line item. And then the assessor wages, the second line, the $73,765, is the assessing administrative support position, which is under the town hall clerical union. So it's a two-position department, both full-time positions. And then everything else is level funded in terms of the services, which encompasses the 50,000, encompasses the various assessing services and so forth the department uses, and supplies and expenses. The treasurer, tax collector, also our finance manager, Barbara, her department. The first line is the treasurer's salary, so that's Barbara's salary and benefits. And then there's an increase, again, contractual increase through her personal service contract. And then the treasurer wages line right underneath that is the assistant treasurer and tax collector. It's Miss Natalie Goodwin. And that position is under the Town Hall Clerical Union. So those increases are contractual.
And Michelle.
And thank you. And then that also wages, the other position is the finance assistant position, which is Miss Michelle Bashara. So Barbara's immediate department has 2 full-time benefited positions, and then the financial assistant, Michelle, is she 30 hours?
32.
32 hours.
Up to 30.
So is also benefited in that department. Other than that, Barbara pretty much has everything else level funded. Next is the Finance Committee. If you'd like us to add a few zeros, this is your chance. But the Finance Committee, you do have, there's $500 budgeted here in support of the committee. On the flip side, just real quick, parking tickets are handled out of my office. That budget line is level funded. The $1,250 is for the service and the system the town uses to process parking tickets. Town Council, which is Kopelman and Page, there is an increase here. The budget last year was at $75,000. If the FinCom recalls, I came before you in the Select Board last spring for a reserve fund transfer due to some unforeseen property enforcement matters and some unforeseen personnel arbitration matters. So this and the year before it came for another RFP. So it's trending based on the trend. I'm recommending we increase it by about $15,000 to cover any costs and to avoid RFTs. And the budget, as you can see, it's gone up over the years, but I should point out, which isn't on here, prior to FY21, there were times where the town council budget was over about $150,000, depending on litigation and so forth. Management support. This has various functions in support of management. There is a position under management support wages, and that is the town's administrative coordinator position that provides full-time professional support to the building department, the planning department, and the Board of Health. That's Ms. Samantha Benoit, does an excellent job. That is largely covered in that line item. There is some overtime as the position is eligible for overtime, being in the union to cover some night functions. And then the various services, supplies, and support. And I can provide a more detailed breakdown of those if the committee would like, but as all largely level funded in management support. Tax title, that's Barbara's responsibility under tax title and foreclosure. That's level funded for this year. The town clerk, also part of the administration. The first line item is the town clerk salary and benefits. The second position, the town clerk wages, is the assistant town clerk. So that department is two full-time benefited positions. And then the town clerk's office does make use of election workers, senior tax work-off. She sometimes seems to have the biggest staff. They're all good people, but minimal budget impact, which is good. Slight decrease in expenses because of less elections. That's that 500. And then elections and registrations. That's also under the town clerk. You'll see there's a $3,000 deduction, as the note says. It's because there are less elections. There's no federal election, no presidential election next year, so there's a savings there. Postage, slight increase per the town accountant based on increase in postage rates. IT, as I mentioned, that's Mr. Max Goodwin, the IT director. You'll see the reduction in consultant services. We had budgeted over 206,000 last year, and there's a significant savings there. Conservation has one full-time position, Ms. Heather Hampson. That first line is her salary and benefits. And then there are a few, there are a few savings. There's a $2,000 reduction under services having to do with conservation restrictions that aren't needed, some money, and another small reduction in expenses. The town planner, one full-time position, that's the 89,000, that's Danny Ruiz, and then level funded there. The zoning board of appeals has a small budget, sort of along the lines of the FinCom, that basically supports their public notices and some supplies. The urban development line, the town of Ayer belongs to the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, the MRPC, and they provide planning support and regional services to the town, which has been a member since 1968. We get an annual assessment. This year it's $33,490, or about a 15% increase. Community and economic development. This is the economic development manager position. This position is funded from two sources. So the 48,000 is from the omnibus budget side, and the other 50% comes from the UDAG account. That's how it's always been set up. This position is currently vacant. We're in the process of hiring for it. I think you will see in draft 2 a slight decrease here because this is budgeted at the top step. The previous individual that held the position was stepped out on the grid, paid the highest salary in the range, so there'll probably be a small reduction there, and then level funded across the board there. Facilities, this is Chuck Schultz, the facilities director. Facilities salary is his salary and benefits. The second line, facilities wages, that's the town custodian, DJ Zoller, and that position is in the union. And then Chuck has a lot of different budget lines. If you look where it says, if it says APD, that's Air Police Department, AFD is the Air Fire Department, all the groundskeeping, all the accounts, pretty much everything is level funded. You get about just past midway on the page, you'll see there's a $5,682 increase, and it's a service contract. That's for all of the technology in this room. So all of this new equipment and so forth, this is the service contract and with that, there's a whole annual analysis and upkeep done. And both Max and Chuck feel strongly at this time we should have the service contract. As we move forward and get better with the system and so forth, that might be a future savings. Other than that, you see the facilities department, not a significant increase as in some years when it came to energy and so forth. General insurance, this is the town's various insurances that fall under my office. Workers' comp, 86,000 is about a 6% increase. The fire police liability insurance, you'll see it says placeholder of 15%. We get the final quote for this usually by the beginning of March. It's always late, and I usually use the same strategy as with the health insurance. Let's hope it works better here. It should come in more around 10%, but so there's a placeholder there. And then the fire causality insurance.
Eric?
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, I don't know why. The police department, which I know that the chair had mentioned you'll want to meet with. You'll see here in the police department, in the interest of time.
So, yes, Robert,
Yeah.
if I can interject.
Yeah.
So, again, we were, as we started here, we were looking to do two things, is one, get just a report on the
Yep,
town's administration's budget.
Yep.
And then we're going to be getting the annual budget.
yep.
So I think you have, as far as the town administration budget, hit most everything, or is there maybe?
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you for keeping me on point. I got lost in the lines. I have covered, I'm just double checking, I have covered all of what we would call the administration departments, correct?
Okay.
Yep. And we did the overview of the drivers.
Okay, so what I'm going to throw out to my group, the committee, is that the rest of this is items are going to be addressed, again, as we're sort of here, looking here, immediately, police and fire department, the chief will be coming in to talk about their particular part of the budget. And so I'm going to suggest that, Robert, you've done your administration presentation. We'll take what I'm going to suggest is we'll take a moment to talk about that. Then we'll take a moment, if there's any general budget questions for you. Then I think we'll then move on to the free cash item.
Perfect, and sorry about that, I got a little ahead of myself in the lines.
No.
Yeah.
So, first of all, are there any questions, comments on just the administration budget? And I'm going to make one comment. I don't think we actually have ever done this in the past, looked at the administration budget.
No, I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
you've always looked at the, the larger.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yep.
I think it's very informative.
Well, actually, some of the items on the last page, where would they fall?
The last page, okay.
Yeah, like the retirement of debt, the retirement and pension,
Oh.
benefits,
Mhm.
would those still be under the general administration?
Okay.
So
Yep.
all of this on his whole budget is all under the general fund on events.
Yep.
But most of those positions, as you get further on, they're not really wages, they're specific expenses like debt or assessments. Yeah.
One thing that I forgot what you mentioned last year, I think, but I forgot the detail, was that when you talked about the town was in the middle of joining a different insurance group to try
Yes.
to keep the cost down.
Yes.
Is this the minimum already the new one, or is that the when you were thinking of migrating to? I forgot. Which
Yeah,
one.
no, Jen, excellent question. So on the health insurance, we had belonged to the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group for years. And the costs kept going like this. And Barbara was the representative to that group and was bringing back information that they were in a lot of financial trouble, people were leaving and so forth. Make a long story short, we switched. We went through the process and we went from Minuteman Neshoba to Maya. Maya is the largest municipal insurance company, health insurance in Massachusetts. Why we did that was because Minuteman was going to collapse and we didn't want to be stuck holding the bag. And there should have been, well, what everybody, including Maya, in 19 other towns, I think, joined them when we did as well. The increase should have been around 10%. For the reasons I said earlier, unfortunately, it's a little bit on the higher side. We're confident that with claims history in the next year, it will level out. So yes, good point. We did make that change last year.
Sounds good. The other one was were you also discussing the utility, like you were, I forget exactly how
The
to phrase that.
municipal aggregation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How's that?
So the municipal aggregation, which doesn't hit this budget, this is for all residents. Your questions are very timely. This Friday, so town meeting approved the municipal aggregation. The select board has adopted a competitive option, so it's less than National Grid. So how this works is on Friday, everybody in Ayer is going to get a mail or information about the aggregation. We're going to do a series of public outreach on that. and you have the choice as to whether you want to opt out. So everybody's going to be put in the aggregation, and honestly, it's going to be less than National Grid, so most likely most people will stay. But the choice is ultimately yours to opt out. So that's going to bring savings to residents and to the residents, so that's what's great. What's good news on our energy front, so you have a good memory, this year, we didn't have to raise energy like we did in previous years. Believe it or not, I don't want to jinx us, both fuel and energy. And Chuck and Dan from DPW and Chuck from Facilities, they put a lot of effort into that. So a good question. Not quite on the budget, but very timely question.
Thank you.
And thank you.
This is very clear, thank you.
All right.
So one follow-up. So are the actual utilities that the town pays, is that a line item on the?
Yep, so,
Under the facilities,
yep.
there's a variety of utility lines.
Oh, okay.
And so under his budget, it pays the town hall, the fire department, the police department.
So you'll see the utilities.
Yep.
Like facilities, facilities utilities.
Oh, I see. Ah.
And so the question then becomes, well, what is Chuck's secret that they're all level funded? And the reason he's been able to level fund it is we do a lot of competitive energy purchasing on the municipal side. We're a green community, efficiencies, and so forth. Chuck and the departments, they do a lot of good work on that front. So we didn't need to factor in for any energy spikes this year. So that's good news.
So how long has he been able to maintain this level funding? This is despite inflation.
Right. So he wasn't, if you recall, 2 budget cycles ago, I came before one of the budget drivers was a huge energy spike on fuel and energy. So that would have been the I think the FY 24, I'm trying to remember. It was, we've been able to since then get this balanced some.
In fiscal '21, it was 90,000
Yeah.
just for town hall, 93 in fiscal '22.
Yep.
And then it dropped back down
Yeah. Yeah.
for the utilities.
So from what I'm seeing then, so I'm looking under facilities,
Mm-hmm.
facilities, utilities, there's utilities APD, utilities. Are these the heating and electric expenses for town hall, police hall, and the fire hall? Is that,
I'm just,
is that what that translate into?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Heat,
Darn.
electricity, air conditioning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. It might be, he's on vacation right now, so his ears might be ringing, or he might be not too happy with me, but I think at some point, maybe not this cycle, but the FinCom should have facilities come in, and Chuck does a good job, tell you all the stuff he does.
Yeah.
But to your question, this is a good year on that front, and overall, we try to keep it, but there have been years where there have been spikes, and some of that is due to, supply and demand on the energy front and so forth. Yes.
May I interject?
Yeah.
Also, we have to take in consideration that we are part of the net metering, solar net metering program, that more sun, more energy we conserve because we're using the solar. So that's a big part of the energy resources.
Yes. Thank you, Carrie. That's a key point. Yeah, we belong to a solar array that we get credits. And it's been a huge, and Carrie's your person on that too for another time.
Is that the one out by the transfer
Solar panels, yes, all around town there's solar panels.
Yeah.
Different meters that we get credits on.
Mhm.
Yeah, this cost actually look quite reasonable considering how big the police department or the fire department, consider their building size.
Mhm.
Because, I know how much it cost me in my lab.
Yeah, that's what I'm just,
Yeah,
and I'm just looking at this building in particular is,
Mhm.
those look pretty reasonable. Okay, we digress. So so that's for administration. Any questions from the committee on our first quick look at the overall budget and the budget drive? Okay, because, well, then, one of the things we're going to do then is, when we go to schedule the next meeting, you'll see. I've got a list of all our other meetings, and one of the things I'm going to sort of mention when we get to that is that, so over the next few meetings, we can, again, as each department comes on, we will be able to look further into this budget, and then as we, over the next week, look at the budgets, we'll have more questions for Robert and Barbara and Carrie.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, there's always more questions. There's no bad questions. There's no dumb questions, et cetera. As you think of anything, big or small questions, just let one of us know, zap us an email. As you know, we like to attend your meetings as much as we can. We want you to have, as we do the public as well, have the information, but also have your questions answered. And there's always a new question. So I know in the interest of time, and I'm over, so I'll do it quickly, had one other topic. If there isn't anything else on the budget, I know we'll be talking about it more. I sent a memo to you and to the select board, and the select board's going to look at it and we'll pull it up on the screen, is going to look at it. Can I just steal?
Sure.
Just steal it for a minute. About the recommended uses for free cash. So,
Yes, and that is the next item on our
Yeah.
agenda.
Let's see. Down.
I think if you click on the other tab that says Finance Committee,
Agendas and
and then
minutes.
click on that top agenda again, there should be
Yeah,
a copy.
there, yeah, and then the second one, memo, yep.
Yeah.
So, we are fortunate, it's a testament, I think, to one of our strengths. It's a good issue to have, is to have what is called free cash. Obviously, it's not free in the sense that what happens after the budget process is any, funding that was budgeted for that wasn't used reverts back to free cash. There are some other variables that generate the free cash number. Each year, the free cash has to be certified by the Department of Revenue. The town accountant generally has it certified. It's subject to the DOR schedule, but usually by late fall and before the end of the calendar year, we get the certified free cash for the year. Now, the certified free cash then needs to be appropriated ultimately by town meeting. So it's not like we get this money and then boards or committees can decide what to do with it. It has to be appropriated by town meeting. Pleased to report this year, as you see in the memo, we had over $3.2 million in certified free cash. In my time in Ayer, this is the highest ever. The average, the last 7 years, we've had over $1 million, give or take. This was one of the highest years. One of the reasons, as Barbara has advised me, is there was unbelievable interest earning gains, right, on interest.
Yes.
And then we had some funding that reverted back to free cash from departments. So $3,261,808 certified by the DOR. So what we do, which we used to do through the buy board, but we're going to do with FinCom and the select board, is we make recommendation to town meeting to how do we use this funding. And so what you have in this memo, this is what Barbara and I are recommending for consideration, obviously by the FinCom and Select Board, for the uses of the free cash. So all of these would are subject to approval at town meeting. So the first, the compensated balances is an account under town meeting. This account we use when somebody retires or separates from service in good standing. Any compensated balances, unused vacation, so forth, that we owe them can come out of this account. I think the committee remembers the reason we did this account is before we had this, historically, this would hit the departmental budgets. And sometimes, because you can't predict always retirements and separation, it would impact town budgets, and they'd go into an RFT situation, so it's more of a budgeting tool. You'll see the current balance is $73,041, and we're recommending that we use $10,000 in free cash to put in there, as we anticipate a retirement in the year ahead. So just trying to be proactive, and that fund should ideally be funded at about around 80 to 85,000 based on the size of the town. The next one is the pension forward funding I talked about. We've done this last several years, is by forward funding that pension fund assessment, we usually get significant savings. Now, this year was a spike for the reasons I said, but if we hadn't forward funded it, it would have been even higher. We anticipate that the next cycle that the savings will be down again. The next one is, per the financial policies, this has been several years, we've been putting $300,000 into the town's post-employment benefits OPEB account. And to get to that $300,000, we take the local meals tax, and whatever that is, and this year Barbara's estimating $175,000, and then we take the balance from free cash, which in this case would be $125,000, to get to the $300,000. We're ultimately obligated to fund OPEB. We still have some time. We're ahead of many places on that. Also, by having a robust OPEB funded account helps our bond rating and other financial metrics. The other one we're recommending is $65,000 to replenish the Urban Development Action Grant, the UDAG grant that's under the Select Board. Is almost, up until this, was completely funded at just over $3 million. There was one recent project in the DPW for $65,000 that was authorized. We're recommending that we replenish that at town meeting, and that's consistent with the financial policies that we try to replenish them. And then to the two lion shares each year, we're recommending on stabilization putting $761,808 in there, and you'll see in the note from Barbara, the market value as of December 31st, 2024 in stabilization is just under $6 million in stabilization, and we do exceed the DOR recommended balance in that, but we want to keep building that up. And stabilization can be used for any lawful purpose subject to a 2/3 vote of town meeting. So this is your rainy day fund, your emergency fund. And then capital stabilization, same mechanics, but designed to be used for capital projects. We're recommending putting $2 million into capital stabilization. Market value, again, as of December 31st, 2024, is just over $4.3 million. And we've been ramping this up since we've reached the benchmark on stabilization, because there are always a lot of capital needs. There's also the highest probability of an emergency or something would be on something in capital. Also, talk of the future with whether it's an elementary school or the senior center project. So if you add up our recommendations, that would be what we're proposing for the use of free cash. Now, of course, on the stabilization and capital stabilization line, you can play with the numbers. You could move some here, move there, and that happens sometimes. But we wanted to start the discussion with you in the Select Board, get your thoughts, and it doesn't have to be all tonight, but this is sort of, when we look at it, this is sort of what we would recommend. Ultimately, it'll come down to the appropriate articles at town meeting being approved. But this is a really positive thing and a true testament to the town of Ayer. When we talk about fiscal strength, there are so many towns that would wish to have a fraction of these balances and resources, and that's a testament to Select Board, FinCom, taxpayers, town meeting in our departments. So that's it in a nutshell on the free cash front. Barbara, the good news is we don't have to use any free cash to balance the budget, which you want to avoid, and we're in pretty good shape. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Any questions for Robert on the proposed free cash use?
Not necessarily on the use of it.
Mhm.
The forward funding, the pension,
Mhm.
we put, authorize
Mhm.
300,000 extra
Mhm.
into the pension.
Mhm.
And yet the assessment went up an additional 200. Were we behind before? Because 300K extra every year seems like a good amount. Like it would stave things off. Was the town underfunded before, or?
So the goal is for the pension fund to be fully funded by 2035. So yes, this is not just our town. This is the whole pension system. So what they do is they do an evaluation every other year that takes into account, like Robert said, we had 7 new employees and raises, so that is what affected the assessment paying out of the omnibus budget for this round. But what our goal is by forward funding, is to hopefully be fully funded prior to that 2035 goal.
Okay.
So that's what that's helping, as well as offsetting some of these unexpected increases.
When you say fully funded, does it mean that after 2035 that you do not need to put any extra money in there?
That's the goal. You would just do a pay-as-you-go, whatever was required that year versus having extra, yes.
So that's assumed that between now and 2035, you don't hire any more employee, right? Because every time you add a new employee, you have to add more pension.
Yep, so with, Middlesex County hires a actual accounting, and they do evaluation every other year. I'd be happy, it's public information to share it with you, and you can actually see how in-depth the calculations are. But for this particular round, we did have some major increases that if we didn't do the forward funding, our increase would have been even more. We did have an analysis done and asked the questions.
And just to add, what was really unique, and it was a positive thing that we planned for. Normally, so every other year this analysis is done, we generally aren't hiring a lot of positions normally. But what happened in the last one was a unique opportunity. We had an opportunity to fully fund 4 firefighters paid by a grant, as you know, for 3 years to meet the minimum manning. So that 4 is unique. We would never, most likely, if it wasn't for the grant. And then the water and sewer superintendent and the town social worker. I don't anticipate for the next cycle any new positions are one of the key things that do drive it. Not the only thing, but the main thing.
It is the main thing.
Yeah.
So when we fill vacant positions, that's factored into that number, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, it can be. So when if we had a
Yes.
bunch of open positions that got filled, that would also affect the valuation. Yep.
One other question. So this is sort of, you made me think of this, Eric. This pension that we're speaking of for free cash is the same as Middlesex Retirement and Pension Fund.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess
And I'm pointing at what from your budget.
Yeah, there's
driver.
2 in there. There's the Middlesex Assessment Pension Fund, 300,000, and then the the OPEB, which we use a portion of the local meals tax to
Yep.
fund.
Okay.
And they both conveniently, to keep it confusing, are both 300,000.
Okay. Okay, so it's the same fund. Okay, good. I've got no other questions. Anything else?
Now, the capital stabilization fund, so it was that, it had about 4.3 million, but you are projecting that we could add 2 million more to it this year.
Correct. Yep.
Okay,
That's the
but
proposal.
that's like a lot, you know, do you foresee that you could add to that fund at this pace every year, or this is a one-time thing?
This, as I mentioned, this is the highest at 3.2 million that I have seen. The average is usually somewhere between 1.2 and say 1.8 million. So this is a high year. Could we do 2 million every year in capital stabilization? Most likely not.
Because if it took you many years to get this. 4
Yes.
months.
That's a good question. Just to point out, that capital stabilization number at 4.3 million, to put it into perspective, has taken about 10 years to get to. But as the chair knows, from capital and so forth, as much as we can ramp this up is because capital, unfortunately, is never cheap, whether it's significant equipment or a building or so forth. And both of these accounts also generate interest as well.
Because this, you will invest this as a part of the kind of, I guess, the big, municipal pension funds and sort of like, right?
So the stabilization funds do have their own unique rules for investments, and we do invest it to get the best rate of return that we can based on those rules.
Yeah. But it's stable too, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Good,
Yes,
yeah.
we look for stability.
And rate of return, both try to optimize
Yes.
both.
So question, you said it was a combination of the interest earnings as well as return from departments, unused budget. Just since, interest rates, as an example, I know it's not everything, may have come down a little bit, but they're still pretty high. What percentage, roughly, you don't have to do, if you know off the top of your head, was earnings versus return of budgetary surplus?
For the stabilizations?
Yeah.
So I did actually just speak with the company we use to invest the funds with that helps manage the portfolio. And we did a 5-year analysis, and if you were to put a percentage rate to the returns, I'd say it's averaged around 4%, which is actually it's better than the trends that have been out there. That's with a combination of what we get on returns from investments and interest rates. So we invest in a lot of things. We have a small percentage that goes into a legal list of stock that we're allowed to invest in. We invest a lot in treasury bonds, and depending on what the rates are when we purchase those term investments, and we invest in a lot of CDs. And it's all very safe, trying to get the best rate with keeping the town's funds safe.
So, in that, I'm just trying to understand.
No, that's
Yeah.
absolutely.
So like 3.2 of free cash.
Mhm.
When funds in the stabilization and capital stabilization earn return, do those earnings stay in those funds, or are they?
In the fund. That's
Okay.
not part of what becomes free cash.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So the free cash is from other municipal funds that I have on hand. Like, for example, if we do a bond issue, that's general fund money until it gets spent. So I'm investing that money, for example. And I can tell you, we don't budget very high we do not budget or estimate revenues high at all on earnings and investments for the general fund, because you just don't always know. So any earnings, and it was a very good earning year, ends up going towards free cash.
Okay.
Which was in fiscal 24 is about 960,000 that we earned in general fund. So almost $1 million of that free cash is from earnings on investments.
So quite a bit of it then was just returned from the town departments.
Yep, so we had a couple unique situations with the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group closing or dissolving. We had to pay over $300,000 in case there were any catastrophic unknown rollout claims after the dissolvement, and we used ARPA funds for that. And then we didn't have any catastrophic claims during that rollout period, which contributed to over $300,000 of that. And then there were also a handful of open positions in a couple departments that had quite a few. So that's the majority of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions, everyone.
Okay. Nothing else, we'll move on to the last parts of our agenda, so thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much, and look forward to continue working with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All All right.
Okay, then the last items on our schedule, our next meeting, in your packets, I put a printout of, I had sent you this by email, our meeting schedule.
Yeah, we had that before.
Right, so I have it, I printed it out again. So our next meeting will be Thursday, February 20th with the fire department doing their presentation. And then March 6th will be the DPW. One thing I just added as a
Yeah,
note
there's
here.
one over there that we're supposed to go to.
Well, yeah, there'll be March 12th will be the public budget
Exactly.
forum.
Yeah.
So you might want, if you just,
Somebody has
yes, yeah, Pauline, if we're just gonna finish our calendar and then we'll get to your question, okay?
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep. So, that's just our schedule for the rest of
Yeah,
this budget season.
yeah.
Okay, so short and sweet is next Thursday, since we'll be our meeting with the fire department. Okay. All right, we'll just move on to Pauline. Public comments, please?
Just a quick comment, Kurt, and
Yes.
I'll be brief. I hope Chief Johnston is still there. I'm a little concerned, and I know this is FY '25 budget moving into FY '26, but the assemblage, how do I say this? The assembly of local fire chiefs have submitted a request to the state for almost $10 million in funding. And I'm concerned that our shortfall, for lack of a better word, is only 50,000, might have a negative impact on the town of Air. I'd like y'all to look into that.
So,
Did y'all hear me? Okay.
yeah, I was just going to, so Chief Johnson is with us. And did you?
Yep, we got that.
Okay, just one. So, okay, that's, anything else, Pauline?
Yes, but I will let you all go tonight because I know it's been a long evening. So thank you all very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Pauline. Okay, if nothing else, I'm going to move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second the move.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, very well. The meeting adjourned at 7:24.